The call came in at 9:17 in the morning. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. I answered anyway. "Hi, I'm calling from the bank regarding your business loan," she said. I frowned slightly. "I don't have a business loan with you," I replied. There was a pause. "Typing, maybe." Then she continued. "I have your name here, your address, and your identification number." She read it all back correctly. Every detail. I didn't interrupt. Then she added one more line. "The loan was taken out 11 days ago. You're listed as a co-applicant with Daniel." I didn't react right away. Not because I didn't understand it. Because I did. I just needed a second to place it somewhere that made sense. It didn't fit anywhere. And that was the problem. Daniel and I had never been close. Not in a way that required explanation. Just different directions. We talked when it made sense. Family events, occasional calls, the kind of contact that keeps things functional without asking for much more. He was always moving towards something. That was his pattern. New ideas, new plans, new businesses that sounded solid when he explained them. Some of them even looked promising at the start. Most of them didn't last. I didn't judge him for that. Not openly, not privately. Some people need to try things that way. Push forward, adjust, try again. That was how he operated. I kept my distance from it. Not because I didn't support him. Because I understood the difference between support and involvement. I asked questions when he brought something up. "What are you doing this time? How's it structured? Who's involved?" He'd answer, usually with more detail than I needed. Then I'd say something simple. "Hope it works out." And that was it. I didn't invest. Didn't attach myself to any of it. That line stayed clear. A few weeks before the call, he mentioned something new. Not in detail. Just a passing comment during a conversation about something else. "I've got something lined up," he said. "Should be bigger than the last one." "What kind of business?" I asked. "Still putting it together," he replied. "I'll tell you once it's moving." I nodded. All right. That was the end of it. I didn't follow up. Didn't ask again. Because that's how it usually went. He talked about things early, before they had shape. Then either they happened or they didn't. I didn't track the difference. That should have been a signal. It wasn't. Nothing about that conversation stood out. It fit the pattern exactly. That was the problem. When something fits too well into what you already expect, you stop paying attention to it. The morning of the call started the same way any other did. Coffee, emails, a couple things I needed to get through before the day really started. There was nothing in the air that suggested anything was off. Nothing waiting for me that I hadn't planned for. I thought this was going to be a normal day. It wasn't. After the call, I didn't sit with it for long. Not because it didn't matter. Because it mattered too much to leave it unanswered. I picked up my phone and called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said. No hesitation. No surprise. That was the first thing that landed. "Did you put my name on a loan?" I asked. I didn't soften it. Didn't build into it. Just asked. There was a pause. Not long. Just enough to confirm something had shifted. "Okay, listen," he said. He didn't ask what I was talking about. Didn't pretend not to understand. He went straight into it. "I was going to tell you," he said. "I just needed to get it through first." I didn't interrupt. He kept going. "It's not a big deal," he added quickly. "I just needed the credit profile to qualify." That's it. His words started to speed up. "I'm handling everything," he said. "You're not going to be affected by this at all." I leaned back slightly in my chair, letting him talk. "This is short term," he continued. "I've already got things lined up on the back end." Each sentence came faster than the last. Like if he filled the space quickly enough, it wouldn't leave room for anything else. I thought this would feel chaotic. It didn't. It felt structured. Like he had already had this conversation in his head. Just not with me. "I knew you'd say no," he said at one point. "That's why I didn't bring it up yet." That landed. Not loudly. Just clearly. He had already decided my answer. Then worked around it. I let him finish. Didn't stop him. Didn't correct anything as he spoke. When he ran out of words, there was a brief silence. Not empty. Just waiting. Then I asked the only thing that mattered. "Did you forge my signature?" There it was. No room to move around it. No way to soften it. Silence. Longer this time. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. That should have been the moment everything broke open. It wasn't. It stayed contained. I had your information, he said finally, from the tax filing a few years ago. I didn't say anything. He continued. I used it, he added. A small pause. And the signature. I handled it. Handled it. That was the word he chose. I thought that would make me react. Raise my voice, push back, force something out of the moment. It didn't. It made everything precise. There wasn't anything unclear anymore. No misunderstanding. No assumption left to question. He hadn't asked, hadn't included me, hadn't even left space for me to say no. He had just used it. I rested my hand flat against the desk, fingers still. That's fraud, I said. Not as an accusation, just as a fact. I'm paying it back, he replied quickly. This isn't going to affect you. That's not the point, I said. He didn't answer that, because there wasn't anything he could say that would change it. The point wasn't the loan. It was the decision behind it, and that had already been made. I thought this would turn into an argument. It didn't. There was nothing to argue. Everything that needed to be understood had already been said. And once it reached that point, the situation stopped being about him explaining it. It became about what I was going to do next. That was the shift. Not emotional, structural. The moment where something moves from conversation into consequence. And once it does, you don't stay on a call much longer. I ended it without saying anything else. Set the phone down on the desk. And for the first time that morning, I didn't try to place it somewhere that made sense. Because it didn't. It didn't need to. It just needed to be handled. And that was already clear too. I didn't sit with it after the call ended. Not in the way people expect. No pacing. No replaying every word. That part was already clear. What he did. How he did it. Why he didn't ask. There wasn't anything to interpret. I picked the phone back up and called him again. He answered faster this time. Look, I was going to, he started. Stop, I said. He stopped. Not reluctantly. Immediately. That was new. I'm not asking you to explain it again, I said. I heard you the first time. A pause. Okay, he said. I leaned back slightly in my chair, looking at nothing in particular. I need to understand exactly what you did, I added. I told you, he replied. I just used your details to get approved. That's it. That's not exact, I said. He exhaled. You're on the loan, he said. Co-applicant. But I'm handling it. I know what I am on paper, I said. I'm asking what you did to make that happen. Another pause. This one longer. I filled out the application, he said. Put your name in, your information. And the bank didn't call me, I said. No, he replied. How did that work? I asked. They don't always call if everything checks out, he said quickly. They just process it. That should have sounded reassuring. It didn't. It sounded practiced. And the signature, I said. He hesitated again. I told you, he said. I handled it. I didn't respond. Just waited. You're making this bigger than it is, he added. I've got it under control. I thought that would irritate me. It didn't. It clarified something. He wasn't seeing the same situation I was. To him, this was a shortcut, a workaround, something temporary that would resolve itself once the business worked. To me, it was already complete. The action had been taken. The line had been crossed. There wasn't anything temporary about that. You used my identity, I said. I used your credit profile, he corrected. That was the pattern. Same thing. Different wording. I didn't argue it. There wasn't any point. I didn't give you permission, I said. I know, he replied. No hesitation. No attempt to soften it. I knew you wouldn't, he added. That should have been the moment it escalated. It didn't. It just settled. He had made a decision that included me, without me, and he had done it knowing exactly what my answer would have been. That was the part that mattered. Not the loan, not the amount, the certainty behind the decision. I picked up a pen from the desk, rolled it once between my fingers, then set it back down. How much is it? I asked. He told me. A number that wasn't small, not something that disappears easily. That's manageable, he said quickly. I've got projections, I've got incoming deals. I'm not asking how you're planning to repay it, I said. He stopped again. I could hear him adjusting on the other end of the line. Then what are you asking? He said. I'm asking what position you just put me in, I replied. That's what I'm explaining, he said. No, I said. You're explaining how you think it's going to work out. Silence. That's not the same thing. Another pause. He didn't have an answer for that. Because there wasn't one. The position was already defined. If he paid it back, nothing happened. If he didn't, everything did. And I wasn't part of that decision either. I thought this would turn into a fight. It didn't. He wasn't defensive in the way I expected. He was focused on keeping it moving, on getting past this part so he could get back to what he was building. That was the disconnect. I wasn't part of the plan. I was part of the structure. There's a difference. You're not going to be affected, he said again. This time slower, more controlled. Like if he said it the right way, it would land differently. That's not something you get to decide, I said. He didn't respond. I let that sit, didn't fill the space. Because the next part wasn't about the conversation anymore. It was about what came after it. Have you made any payments yet? I asked. First one's not due yet, he said. I've got time. Time. That was his frame. Time to fix it. Time to make it work. Time to prove that it wasn't a problem. That should have mattered. It didn't. Because the issue wasn't the timeline. It was the fact that it existed at all. I'm going to the bank, I said. That was the first shift he reacted to. Why? He asked quickly. You don't need to do that. I do, I said. They're just going to complicate it, he added. It's already set up. Everything's fine. It's not fine, I said. Not louder. Not sharper. Just placed. That stopped him. I thought he'd push harder. He didn't. Just give me a little time, he said. There it was again. Time. The same word Claire had used. The same space people ask for when they're not ready for something to be fully seen. I didn't give it to him. No, I said. Another silence. Longer this time. Okay, he said finally. Not agreement. Not acceptance. Just acknowledgement that he wasn't controlling what happened next. That was the power shift. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a moment where the situation moved out of his hands. And into mine. I'll call you later, he added. Don't, I said. That landed harder than anything else I had said. Just don't, I repeated. He didn't respond. Because he understood what that meant. Not distance. Not punishment. Structure. From that point on, this wasn't something we were going to talk through. It was something that was going to be handled. I ended the call. Set the phone down again. This time, I didn't pick it back up. There wasn't anything left to say. The conversation had done its job. It had confirmed everything I needed to know. And once it reached that point, the next step wasn't discussion. It was action. The bank was across town. I drove there without thinking about the route. Just followed the same turns I'd taken 100 times before. Traffic was light. Nothing about the drive matched what had just shifted. That felt appropriate. When something changes that much, the outside world usually doesn't adjust with it. I parked, sat in the car for a second, then got out. Inside, everything was clean, controlled. People waiting quietly. Numbers being called. Routine moving exactly as it should. I walked up to the desk and gave my name. I need to review a loan that was open to my name, I said. The woman behind the counter looked at me, then at her screen. Do you have an account with us? She asked. No, I said. She paused. Okay, she replied. Give me a moment. A few minutes later, I was sitting across from someone in a smaller office. Door closed. Screen turned slightly toward him. He asked for identification. I handed it over. He checked it carefully, then nodded. You're listed as a co-applicant on a business loan, he said. I know, I replied. I didn't apply for it. He didn't react, didn't question it, just typed something into his system. That's what we'll need to verify, he said. He pulled up the documents, turned the screen slightly so I could see. There it was. My name, my address, every detail accurate. Then the signature. I looked at it for a second, then a second longer. It was close. Close enough that someone who didn't know my handwriting wouldn't question it. But it wasn't mine. Not even close, once he knew what to look for. I thought that would hit harder. It didn't. It just confirmed what I already knew. I rested my hand lightly on the edge of the desk. That's not my signature, I said. He nodded. All right, he replied. We'll need to escalate this to our fraud department. No hesitation. No complication. Just process. That was the difference between how Daniel saw this and how it actually existed. For him, it was a workaround. For the bank, it was fraud. Clear. Defined. Handled the same way every time. He asked me a series of questions. When did I become aware? Did I authorize anyone to act on my behalf? Did I sign any documents related to this loan? No, I said to each one. He typed as I answered. No reaction. No judgment. Just recording. I thought this would feel like betrayal. It didn't. It felt procedural. That was worse, because it meant this wasn't personal in the way I had framed it. It was structural, something that fit into a system with clear outcomes. Once the statement was complete, he explained the next steps. The account will be flagged, he said. Access to the funds may be restricted while we investigate. Maybe, I asked. He nodded. Depends on how far along things are. I understood what that meant. Daniel had already moved forward with it, spent time building around it, maybe already used some of it. That part didn't change what needed to happen. It just added weight to it. We'll also need to contact the other party listed on the loan, he added. Daniel, not my brother. The other party. That shift mattered. I nodded once. Do what you need to do, I said. He closed the file, printed a copy of my statement, and handed it to me. Keep this for your records, he said. I took it, folded it once, and placed it in my jacket pocket. That should have felt like a turning point. It wasn't. It felt like alignment. Everything now existed in the same structure. Clear. Defined. Moving forward. When I left the bank, I didn't call Daniel. Didn't text. Didn't check if he had tried to reach me. I already knew he had. My phone had buzzed twice while I was inside. I didn't look at it. There wasn't anything he could say at that point that would change what had already been set in motion. That part was done. I drove to a lawyer's office next. Not because I didn't understand what was happening, because I wanted it documented properly. The difference between knowing something and formalizing it matters. Inside, I explained the situation. Short, direct. My brother used my identity to take out a loan, I said. The lawyer didn't ask if I was sure. Didn't question the framing. Just nodded. That's identity fraud, he said. Same words I had used earlier. Different weight now. He asked a few questions. Reviewed the statement from the bank. Then laid out the position clearly. You have no obligation to carry this, he said. But you need to follow through completely. What does that mean? I asked. No informal resolution, he replied. No agreement outside the process. You let this move through the system as it's designed to. I nodded once. That matched what I had already decided. Daniel called again while I was there. I saw his name on the screen. Let it ring. The lawyer glanced at the phone, then back at me. You don't need to take that, he said. I know, I replied. I thought this would feel like escalation, like things were getting worse. It didn't. It felt like things were being placed where they should have been from the beginning. That was the shift. Not emotional, not reactive, just correct. When I left the office, I didn't check my messages. Didn't need to. I already knew what they would say. Explanations, reassurances, requests for time. Time wasn't part of it anymore. That had passed the moment he made the decision without me. Now, it was just consequence. And once something reaches that point, there's nothing left to negotiate. Only what you're willing to stand behind. And that part was already decided too. I didn't go back and reconsider anything after that. Not on the drive home. Not later that night. There wasn't anything left to weigh. The facts were already in place. What he did, how he did it, what it meant, and more importantly, what it created. I sat at the kitchen table that evening, the copy of the statement from the bank folded once in front of me. Didn't open it again. Didn't need to. I already knew what it said. That should have felt heavy. It didn't. It felt settled. That was the difference. When something is still unclear, it pulls at you. You turn it over, try to find a version of it that fits better. This didn't move. It stayed exactly where it was. I thought about calling him. Not to argue, just to say something that closed the loop on the conversation. I didn't. There wasn't anything to add. He already knew what he had done, and now I knew what I was going to do about it. That was enough. The next call I made was to my parents. Not emotional, not reactive, just before it reached them another way. My mother answered. "Hey," she said. "Hey," I replied. There was a pause. Not unusual, just the space where people expect something normal to follow. "I need to tell you something," I said. That changed the tone immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked. "It's about Daniel," I said. He used my name to take out a loan. Silence. Not confusion. Just processing. "What do you mean?" she said. "I mean, I'm listed as a co-applicant," I replied. "And I didn't agree to it." Another pause. "That doesn't sound right," she said. "It's not," I said. I didn't explain the details. Didn't walk her through the process or what I had already done. Just gave her the structure. "That's a misunderstanding," she said. I almost smiled at that. Not because it was surprising, because it fit. "No," I said. "It's not." That was the first line I held. Not aggressively, just clearly. She didn't push it immediately. "Have you talked to him?" she asked. "I have," I said. "And?" she asked. He knew I'd say no, I replied. So he didn't ask. That landed. I could hear it in the way she didn't respond right away. "That's not how this works," she said finally. "I know," I replied. Another pause. Longer this time. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I've already started the process," I said. "I reported it to the bank. I've spoken to a lawyer." That shifted it again. Not just information now. Action. "You're going to make this official," she said. "I already have," I replied. That should have felt like escalation. It didn't. It felt like the only version of this that made sense. My father got on the line a moment later. "What's going on?" he said. Same explanation. Short, direct, no extra framing. He listened without interrupting, then said, "You could have handled this between yourselves." There it was. Not unexpected, just stated. "No," I said. That was it. No expansion, no justification. Just the answer. He didn't argue it. Didn't agree either. Just accepted that I wasn't moving from it. That was the moment I understood something clearly. Their disappointment wasn't going to change what needed to happen. And what needed to happen wasn't going to align with what they would have preferred. That should have created pressure. It didn't. It removed it. Because once you accept that the outcome isn't going to satisfy everyone, you stop trying to shape it that way. "You're going to cause problems for him," my father said. "He already did that," I replied. That was the second line. Not emotional, not defensive, just accurate. He didn't respond, because there wasn't anything to counter it with. The problem already existed. I was just refusing to absorb it quietly. "I'll talk to him," my father said. "You can," I replied. "But this isn't something that changes based on a conversation." That landed. Not as resistance, as structure. There wasn't a version of this where it got handled inside the family and disappeared. That option was gone the moment Daniel made the decision without me. The call ended shortly after that. No resolution, no agreement, just positions established. I set the phone down on the table and leaned back in the chair slightly. That should have felt like conflict. It didn't. It felt like alignment. Everything was now in the open. Not emotionally. Structurally. Daniel had acted. The system was responding. I had chosen my position within it. And my parents had their own. All of it clear. I thought this would feel like turning against him. It didn't. It felt like refusing to step into something that was never mine to carry. That was the decision. Not about him. About me. What I was willing to accept. Why I wasn't. And once that line was placed, there wasn't anything left to negotiate. It held on its own, exactly where it needed to be. The process moved quickly once it started. Faster than I expected. The bank flagged the account within a couple of days. Access to the remaining funds was frozen. That part reached Daniel before anything else did. He called that night. I didn't answer. Then again, and again, 3 times in a row. I watched the phone light up on the table, then go still, then light up again. That should have pulled me into it. It didn't. There wasn't anything left to say that would change the direction things were already moving in. He left a message after the third call. "Call me," he said. "It's getting complicated now." Complicated. I almost laughed at that. Not because it was wrong, because it was late. It had been complicated the moment he decided to use my name. Now it was just visible. The next day, my mother called. Different tone this time. Less confusion. More urgency. "You need to talk to your brother," she said. "I don't," I replied. "He's trying to fix it," she added. "He says you're making it worse." I leaned back slightly in my chair, adjusting my sleeve without looking at it. "I'm not making anything worse," I said. "I'm just not hiding it." She didn't respond right away. "You could have handled this quietly," she said. I thought this would frustrate me. It didn't. It clarified something again. Quietly didn't mean better. It meant contained. And contained meant I carry the risk. "No," I said. "I couldn't." That was enough. She didn't push further. Because somewhere in the conversation, she understood that I wasn't negotiating anymore. Daniel called again later that afternoon. I still didn't answer. At that point, it wasn't avoidance. It was structure. Anything he needed to say could go through the same channels everything else was going through now. Formal. Documented. Clear. 2 days later, I got a message. Not call. Not a voice note. A document. Attached to an email. Short. Direct. Clean. An apology. Not casual. Not emotional. Structured. "I acknowledge that I used your information without your consent. I take full responsibility for the situation. I am committed to resolving the financial obligation." I read it once. Then again. It was clear what it was. Not just an apology. A position. Something written with guidance. That should have felt hollow. It didn't. It felt appropriate. Because the situation had moved beyond personal conversation into something that required language like that. I didn't respond immediately. I let it sit, not to create tension, just to match the pace everything else was moving at. Later that evening, I replied. "Short. I received your message. I acknowledge it. That was it. No acceptance. No rejection. Just recognition." I thought this would feel like confrontation. It didn't. It felt like distance settling into place. Over the next few weeks, things continued through the process. The bank finalized their investigation. My name was formally removed from the loan. Everything was documented. Clear. Clean. The responsibility shifted back to where it should have been from the beginning. Daniel. Alone. That was the payoff. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just correct. He had built the situation assuming I would absorb part of it. When that didn't happen, everything restructured around him. As it should have. I heard updates through my parents. Not directly from him. "He's trying to manage it," my mother said one evening. "I'm sure he is," I replied. "You could have made this easier," she added. I picked up the glass in front of me, took a sip, set it back down. "I didn't make it harder," I said. "I just didn't make it disappear." That landed. Not fully accepted, but understood. That was enough. I didn't follow the details closely after that. Didn't need to. The outcome was already set. My involvement was finished. That was the line. Not when a loan was removed. When I stopped needing to track what happened next. I thought this would feel like winning something. It didn't. It felt like removing something that had never belonged to me. There's a difference. Winning implies a contest. This wasn't that. It was correction. And once it reached that point, there wasn't anything left to resolve between us in the way it used to exist. The relationship had already shifted. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just permanently. That was the part no one said out loud. Not my parents. Not him. But it was there. Clear as everything else had been. And just like everything else in this situation, it didn't need to be discussed to be real. It took a few months for everything to clear completely. Not the emotional part. That had settled much earlier. I mean the actual process. Letters. Confirmations. Updates from the bank. Documents from a lawyer that said, in cleaner language than anyone in the family ever used, that my name was no longer attached to the loan. I read each one once, then filed it away. Didn't study them. Didn't keep coming back to them. that should have felt satisfying. It didn't. It felt finished. And finished was enough. My credit was cleared. Formally. That mattered more than I expected. Not because I had doubted it would happen. Because I hadn't realized how different it feels when something stops being a threat on paper. Until then, part of me had stayed slightly alert. Not panicked, just aware. Once the final document came through, that part went quiet. I sat at the kitchen table when I read it, phone off to the side, coffee going cold because I had forgotten it was there. I reached the last page, set it down, and just stayed there for a second. No reaction, no release, just stillness. I thought that moment would feel bigger. It didn't, because the real decision had happened much earlier. The day I chose not to carry it for him. Everything after that was process. Necessary, but secondary. The relationship with Daniel didn't recover. That sounds dramatic when you say it plainly. It wasn't dramatic while it was happening. We just stopped. No long, final conversation. No one last attempt to clean it up. There were a few practical messages early on, all handled through lawyers or in writing. Then less. Then nothing. At family gatherings, if we were both there, we were civil. That was the word for it. Civil. He'd nod. I nod back. If something had to be said, got said. Pass that over. What time are you leaving? Simple things with no weight attached. From the outside, it probably looked manageable. Maybe even mature. That's the thing about broken trust when it happens inside a family. It rarely looks as damaged as it is. People see the lack of yelling and assume the structure is still standing. It isn't. Not really. I thought I'd missed the version of him I used to have. I didn't. That surprised me. What I missed, if anything, was the assumption behind him. The ordinary one. That a brother might be careless, selfish, unreliable, whatever else families survive all the time. But not this. Not someone deciding your name was available because he needed it. That was the part that didn't come back. Not affection. Permission. He had crossed a line that changed the category of the relationship. And once that happens, you don't rebuild it with time alone. My parents had a harder time with it than I did. Not because they suffered more. Because they wanted a version of the story that didn't exist. My mother kept trying, at first, to soften the edges. He knows he was wrong, she said once. He's ashamed of it. We were standing in her kitchen while she dried dishes that were already dry. I leaned against the counter and let her finish. I'm sure he is, I said. She looked at me then, waiting for something else. Forgiveness, maybe. Or at least a sign that I was moving toward it. I wasn't. That should have made me feel guilty. It didn't. Not because I'm cold. Because guilt wasn't the right shape for it. I hadn't done anything to him. I had just refused to protect him from what he had done to me. There's a difference people like to blur when family is involved. My father was less emotional about it, but somehow harder to listen to. He didn't defend Daniel exactly. He defended the idea of handling it differently. You made it formal too quickly, he said one afternoon. We were outside, both of us looking anywhere but at each other. No, I said. He made it formal when he signed my name. That ended the conversation. Not because he agreed, because there wasn't a way around it. That became the pattern with my parents after that. They were disappointed in him for what he did, and disappointed in me for not absorbing the aftermath in a way that would have kept the family quieter. I accepted both. That was the shift. I stopped needing them to see my decision the right way. They had their version of what family should protect. I had mine, and mine included me. I thought standing by that would feel lonely. It did sometimes, but also felt clean. Cleaner than the alternative. Because the alternative wasn't peace. It was permission. That's the memorable part, if there is one. Not the forged signature. Not the lawyer. Not even the months it took to untangle everything. It was the realization that some people don't ask whether they can use you. They just check whether you'll stop them. And if you don't, they call that love. Or trust. Or family. It isn't. It's access. Once I saw that clearly, the rest of the decision got easier to carry. Life went back to normal in the ways that matter. Work stayed steady. Bills got paid. Mornings looked like mornings again instead of evidence files and calls I didn't want to take. Nothing outwardly dramatic changed. That mattered too, because it reminded me how unnecessary his choice had been. He didn't take my name because I was the only way forward. He took it because it was easier than hearing no. That should have made me angrier over time. It didn't. It made me more exact. I check things differently now. Not obsessively, just consciously. Credit reports, documents, anything with my name attached to it. That isn't paranoia. It's maintenance. And I'm fine with that. I'd rather live slightly more aware than ever again assume that blood makes a boundary unnecessary. Daniel eventually managed the loan on his own, as he should have from the beginning. I heard that indirectly, never from him. He kept the business moving in some form, restructured things, found a way to carry what was already his. Good. That was always the correct arrangement. I didn't need him to fail to know I was right. That was important. This was never about revenge. I didn't want him ruined. Didn't need him humiliated. I just needed my name returned to me. And once it was, there was nothing left to argue about. That's how I know I made the right decision. Not because it felt good. It didn't. Not really. But every version of the alternative required me to accept something I should never have accepted in the first place. That my identity was available to anyone close enough to reach for it. It wasn't. It isn't. And the day I stopped acting like family made that more complicated was the day everything started moving back where it belonged. Nothing healed cleanly after that, but it settled honestly, and I can live with honest. I still think about that call sometimes, mostly because of how ordinary the morning felt before it. That part stays with me. If stories like this hit something familiar, where silence ends is where I keep telling them. And tell me this, if it had been your brother, would you have gone formal too? Or try to keep it inside the family?